Bigfoot is real, and not only real, but also very smart. And although the one I met was extremely smart and kind, he made me understand his kind is just like us, full of good and bad apples. He showed me things that made me realize there exists in Northern California a giant Bigfoot, bigger than the one I met, that hunts hikers like myself. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I got to meet this kind Bigfoot first. I've done a lot of crazy things in my life. I've base jumped off cliffs in Norway where one wrong move means you're dead before you hit the ground. I've free climbed rock faces in Yosemite without ropes, trusting nothing but my fingers and toes to keep me alive hundreds of feet in the air. I've surfed 20-foot waves in Hawaii that could snap my spine like a twig. I've jumped out of airplanes, gone cave diving in underwater systems where you can't see your hand in front of your face, spent nights alone in the Australian outback where everything wants to kill you. I'm what you'd call an adrenaline junkie. I've always needed that rush, that feeling of dancing on the edge between life and death. My friends think I'm crazy. My family has given up trying to talk sense into me. But that feeling of pure aliveness you get when you're doing something dangerous, when your body is flooded with adrenaline and every sense is heightened and you feel more real than you've ever felt, that's what I live for. That's what I chase. But nothing I've ever done prepared me for what I encountered on the Devil's Creek Trail in Northern California. Nothing could have prepared me for that. Devil's Creek has a reputation. It's a bad one. Over 40 hikers have disappeared there in the last decade alone. 40 people who walked into those woods and never came back out. Their cars were found at the trailhead. Their gear sometimes turned up scattered through the forest. But the people themselves vanished without a trace. No bodies, no answers, just gone. Most people stay away from the place. The locals in the nearby towns whisper about it over beers in dim bars, trading stories they've heard from friends of friends. Rangers who work the area warn hikers not to go too deep into the forest. They tell you to stick to the marked trails, to never camp overnight past the 3rd mile marker, to always tell someone where you're going and when you'll be back. The warnings are stern and frequent. But me, I went there specifically because of the danger. I'd read about the disappearances online, spent hours going through old news articles and missing person reports. The mystery fascinated me. What could be taking these people? Bears? Getting lost? Something else? I thought it would give me the ultimate thrill, the ultimate rush. I wanted to walk into those woods and see what everyone else was afraid of. I wanted to feel that edge. Now I know the truth about what's out there. I know what happened to those people. And I wish with every fiber of my being that I didn't. Some knowledge comes with a price, and the price for this knowledge has been my peace of mind. I'll never feel safe in the dark again. It was early October when I drove 6 hours north from my apartment to the trailhead. I left before dawn, drove through the sunrise, watched the landscape change from city to suburbs to small towns to nothing but forests and mountains. The morning was crisp and clear when I arrived, the kind of perfect autumn day where everything feels sharp and alive. The air smelled like pine and fallen leaves. The sky was that deep, cloudless blue you only get in October. I'd packed light for a 3-day trip, just the essentials. Tent, sleeping bag, water filter, some dried food, basic first aid kit, knife, fire starter, flashlight, nothing fancy. I've done enough wilderness trips to know what I actually need versus what's just dead weight. My pack weighed maybe 40 pounds, comfortable for a multi-day hike. At the trailhead parking lot, there were 2 other cars. I'd expected the place to be deserted given its reputation, so seeing other people was almost reassuring. I was loading my pack when I heard voices. A couple was coming back down the trail, an older guy with a gray beard and a woman about the same age, both wearing expensive hiking gear that looked brand new. The guy saw me adjusting my pack straps and walked over. He asked where I was headed in that friendly way hikers have of starting conversations with strangers. When I told him I was planning to go deep into the forest, maybe 10 or 12 miles in, his whole demeanor changed. His face went serious. He told me that was a bad idea, that I should turn back after 5 miles at most. His wife came over and joined in, her voice urgent. She said they'd heard stories about people going missing in these woods, too many stories. She said they'd only gone 3 miles in themselves before deciding to turn back. Something about the forest didn't feel right to her. It was too quiet, too empty. She couldn't explain it, but she knew they needed to leave. Another hiker who was loading gear into his truck overhead us and turned around. He was younger, maybe mid-30s, with a kind of lean, weathered look that comes from spending a lot of time outdoors. He warned me to stick to the marked trails and definitely not camp overnight past the 3rd mile marker. He said he'd been hiking this area for years, and he'd seen things change. Used to be you could go deep into these woods without worry. But in the last 5 or 6 years, something was different. People who went too far didn't always come back. I thanked them all for the advice. I told them I'd be careful. But honestly, their warnings only made me more excited. The fear in their voices, the genuine concern in their eyes, that just confirmed that there was something real to be worried about here. This wasn't just paranoia or urban legends. These were experienced hikers telling me to be afraid. And that's exactly why I'd come. I wanted to see what they were afraid of. I wanted to feel that fear myself. I waved goodbye to them and headed up the trail. The first few hours were exactly what I'd hoped for. The forest was stunning. Autumn had painted everything in shades of gold and orange and deep red. The sunlight filtered through the canopy in long, dusty beams. Leaves crunched under my boots. The trail was well maintained at first, clearly marked with blazes on the trees. I saw wildlife everywhere. Squirrels chattered at me from the branches above. Birds called back and forth. I watched a deer bound gracefully across the trail about 50 yards ahead of me, its white tail flashing as it disappeared into the underbrush. Everything felt alive and vibrant. This was exactly the kind of wilderness experience I loved. Just me and nature, no other people around for miles. Around noon, I stopped to eat lunch on a fallen log. I'd made it about 6 miles in by my estimate. The trail had become less obvious, more overgrown. The blazes on the trees were fewer and farther between, but I had my GPS and I knew how to navigate by compass if needed. I wasn't worried about getting lost. By 4 in the afternoon, I'd gone about 8 miles into the forest. I found a nice clearing with a small stream running through it. Perfect spot for a campsite. I set up my tent, filtered some water from the stream, started a small fire. As I was making dinner, watching the sun sink lower through the trees, I felt this deep sense of satisfaction. I'd come out here alone to test myself against whatever this forest had to offer, and so far it had been beautiful and peaceful. I cooked some freeze-dried pasta, ate it while watching the fire, felt pretty proud of myself for ignoring everyone's warnings and coming out here anyway. This was fine. There was nothing to be afraid of. People got lost, sure, but I wasn't going to get lost. I knew what I was doing. As darkness fell properly, I heard something moving in the brush around my campsite. Just rustling sounds, branches snapping. I assumed it was a deer or maybe a raccoon drawn by the smell of my food. I stood up and yelled to scare it off, clapping my hands loudly. The rustling stopped. I went into my tent and sealed it up, made sure my food bag was properly hung from a tree away from my campsite. Then I climbed into my sleeping bag and fell asleep, listening to the sounds of the forest. I woke up with the sunrise. The forest was beautiful in the early morning light, mist rising from the stream. I climbed out of my tent to start making breakfast and immediately noticed something was wrong. My backpack, which I'd left leaning against a tree about 6 feet from my tent, had been moved. It was now sitting on the other side of the clearing, maybe 10 or 15 feet away from where I'd left it. I walked over to it slowly, my heart starting to pound. The pack wasn't torn open, nothing was scattered around it. It had just been moved, picked up, and carefully set down in a different spot. I opened it up and checked inside. All my food was still there. My gear was untouched. Nothing was missing. But someone or something had definitely moved it during the night. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it had been a bear. Bears can be curious, can grab things and move them around. But usually they tear into packs looking for food. They don't gently relocate them. And I hadn't heard any noise during the night. No sounds of a large animal moving around my campsite. Whatever did this had been silent. Maybe a raccoon had somehow dragged it. But raccoons aren't strong enough to move a 40-pound pack. And again, they would have torn into it looking for food. This was different. This was deliberate. Something had picked up my pack and moved it with what seemed like purpose or curiosity. I stood there in the morning mist, holding my pack, trying not to let my imagination run wild. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe I was misremembering where I'd left it. Maybe I'd been more tired than I thought and put it down in a different spot without really registering it. That had to be it. I was letting the warnings from those other hikers get into my head. I made myself some coffee and oatmeal, packed up my camp, and decided to continue deeper into the forest. The mystery of the moved backpack was unsettling, but I wasn't going to let it scare me off. I'd come here for adventure, and I wasn't ready to turn back yet. The second day of hiking started off normal enough. I followed the remnants of the trail deeper into the wilderness. The path was barely visible now, just a faint track through the undergrowth. The forest was getting denser, darker. The trees were older here, massive trunks covered in moss and lichen. Less sunlight made it to the forest floor. Around noon, I noticed something strange. The forest had gone completely silent. Back near the trailhead, there had been constant noise. Birds singing, insects buzzing, squirrels rustling through the leaves, wind in the branches. But now there was nothing. Just this heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to press in on me from all sides. I stopped walking and just stood there, listening to nothing. I've spent enough time in the wilderness to know what this means. When the forest goes quiet, it's because there's a predator nearby. All the small animals stop making noise, stop moving, try to become invisible. It's an instinctive response to danger. My skin started to crawl. Every hair on my body stood up. My mouth went dry. This was wrong. Something was very wrong. I slowly turned in a circle, scanning the forest around me, looking for any sign of movement. Nothing, just silent trees and shadows. That's when I heard the footsteps behind me. At first I thought I was imagining it. But no, there it was. Step, 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 matching my own pace exactly. I walked forward. The footsteps followed. I stopped. They stopped. I walked again. They walked again. I spun around, heart pounding, expecting to see someone or something right behind me. Nothing, just empty forest. But I knew what I'd heard. Those footsteps were real. Something was following me. I started walking faster. The footsteps behind me kept pace. I started to jog. The footsteps jogged. My heart was racing now, adrenaline flooding my system. But this wasn't the good kind of adrenaline, the kind I sought out. This was pure fear. I kept stopping and spinning around, trying to catch whatever was following me. But every time I looked, there was nothing there, just trees and shadows and silence. I knew I wasn't imagining it. The footsteps were too regular, too consistent. Something was out there, matching my movements, staying just out of sight. I remembered a trick a survival instructor had taught me years ago. If you think something is following you, hide and wait. Watch your back trail. See what comes along. so I found a large boulder just off the trail and crouched behind it, making myself as small as possible. I controlled my breathing, tried to slow my pounding heart, and I waited. 5 minutes passed, nothing. 10 minutes, still nothing. The forest remained silent and empty. I waited 20 minutes total, barely breathing, watching the trail where I'd come from. Not a single thing moved, not a branch swayed, not a leaf fell. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath. Finally, I stood up, feeling foolish. Maybe I really was imagining things. Maybe the isolation was getting to me. Maybe those warnings from the other hikers had planted seeds of paranoia in my mind. I stepped back onto the trail and continued walking. The footsteps resumed immediately, step for step right behind me. My blood went cold. Whatever this was, it had watched me hide. It had waited while I waited. It had known I was trying to spot it, and it had stayed hidden until I gave up. This wasn't some animal following me out of curiosity. This was something intelligent, something patient. I kept walking, kept listening to those footsteps behind me. My mind was racing. What could this be? A mountain lion? No, they don't follow like this. They stalk silently and then ambush. A bear? Bears aren't usually this subtle. Another hiker? But why would someone follow me like this, staying hidden, not responding when I turned around? The afternoon wore on. I kept moving deeper into the forest, and whatever was behind me kept following, always there, always just out of sight. The fear started to shift into something else, something worse, a creeping dread that settled into my bones and wouldn't leave. By late afternoon, I was genuinely frightened. The adrenaline rush I'd been seeking had turned into something darker, something I didn't want. This wasn't fun anymore. This wasn't exciting. This was terror. I wanted to turn around and run back to my truck, but I was miles deep into the forest by now. It would take hours to get back, and I'd have to walk right past whatever was following me. I stopped to rest for a moment, trying to decide what to do. I was standing in a small clearing, pulling out my water bottle to drink. My hands were shaking. The footsteps behind me had stopped when I stopped. I could feel eyes on me. The feeling of being watched was so intense it was almost physical, like pressure on my skin. That's when I caught movement in my peripheral vision. Off to my left, maybe 50 yards away, something massive was moving between the trees, moving upright, walking on two legs like a person. But it was too big, way too big. I turned my head slowly to look directly at it. My brain struggled to process what my eyes were seeing. It was standing in a patch of afternoon sunlight, clear as day, 8 or 9 feet tall, covered entirely in dark brown fur, massive shoulders, arms that hung down past where its knees would be, a sagittal crest on top of its head. The proportions were wrong for a human, too big, too powerful. It was a Bigfoot, standing right there, looking at me. There was no mistaking it for anything else. This wasn't a bear standing up. This wasn't a person in a costume. This was something real, something alive, something that wasn't supposed to exist. We stood there staring at each other. Time seemed to stop. I couldn't move, couldn't think. My brain was screaming that this wasn't possible, that Bigfoot wasn't real, that I must be having some kind of breakdown. But it was right there, solid, real, breathing. I could see its chest rising and falling. Its eyes were dark and deep set, but they looked intelligent, not animal-like. There was thought behind those eyes. Awareness. It was studying me the same way I was studying it. We were two intelligent beings encountering each other, sizing each other up. I don't know how long we stood there looking at each other. It felt like forever. It felt like no time at all. The world had narrowed down to just me and this creature, this impossible thing that shouldn't exist but did. Then my adrenaline junkie instincts kicked in, the ones that have kept me alive through a dozen dangerous situations. Every survival instinct in my body screamed at me to run, so I ran. I took off through the forest as fast as my legs would carry me. I left my backpack where it was, left my water, left everything, just ran. Branches whipped my face and arms, roots tried to trip me. I stumbled and nearly fell a dozen times but kept running. Behind me, I could hear the Bigfoot crashing through the undergrowth, breaking branches, moving fast. Here's the thing that still doesn't make sense to me. It was faster than me. Way faster. I could tell from the sounds it was making that it could cover ground much quicker than I could. Those long legs, that powerful build. It should have caught me in seconds, but it didn't. It stayed behind me, maybe 30 or 40 yards back. Never gaining, never falling behind, just following. I ran for what felt like hours. My lungs were burning, my legs were screaming. My vision started to blur from exhaustion. I had no idea where I was going. I'd left the trail far behind. I was just running blindly through the forest, trying to get away from this impossible thing that was chasing me. But gradually, even through my panic, I started to realize something. It could catch me if it wanted to. This thing was fast and powerful, and I was just a human running through unfamiliar terrain. If it wanted me dead, I'd already be dead. So why was it staying back? Why was it just following me? My body made the decision before my brain did. My legs simply gave out. I stumbled, fell, tumbled down a slope into a small ravine. I landed hard at the bottom, the wind knocked out of me, every muscle in my body trembling from exhaustion. I couldn't run anymore even if I wanted to. I just lay there gasping for air, tasting blood in my mouth from where I'd bitten my tongue. This was it. This was how I was going to die. I'd pushed my luck too far this time. I'd gone looking for danger and I'd found something I couldn't handle. The irony wasn't lost on me. All those death-defying stunts I'd pulled, all those close calls, and I was going to die in these woods killed by something that wasn't even supposed to exist. I heard it approaching, those heavy footsteps crunching through leaves and branches. It came to the edge of the ravine above me and looked down. I could see its silhouette against the darkening sky. Then it started climbing down the slope. Moving carefully, deliberately. It stopped about 10 feet away from where I was lying and just stood there. I was too exhausted to move, too exhausted to even be properly afraid anymore. My body had flooded itself with so much adrenaline over the last hour that I'd hit that wall where you just go numb. I closed my eyes and waited for the end, waited for the pain, waited to feel those massive hands close around me, but nothing happened. I could hear it breathing, heavy and labored like it had been running hard too. But it didn't approach, didn't touch me. I opened my eyes. The Bigfoot was looking at me with those dark, intelligent eyes. Then it did something that made my brain short-circuit. It raised one massive hand, extended a finger that was as thick as a bratwurst, and held it to its lips. The universal human gesture for quiet, for silence. I stared at it in complete shock. It understood gestures. It was trying to communicate with me. This wasn't just some animal. This was something that could think, that could understand basic communication. My view of reality shifted in that moment. This wasn't a monster. This was another kind of person. Its eyes weren't aggressive or hungry. They were worried, almost frightened, like it was afraid of something. But if this massive creature was afraid, what could it possibly be afraid of? What could scare something that size and strength? The Bigfoot gestured again, pointing down, telling me to stay low, to stay quiet. Then it crouched beside me, both of us pressed against the side of the ravine, and we waited. The creature kept glancing up at the forest above us, listening intently. I listened too. At first I heard nothing but my own pounding heartbeat. Then I heard it. Footsteps, but different from the ones that had been following me. These were heavier, slower, more deliberate. Each step made the ground vibrate slightly. The Bigfoot beside me tensed up, every muscle in its body going rigid. I could see it was genuinely afraid, and if this thing was afraid, then I should be terrified. Through the trees above the ravine, I saw another shape moving, much larger than the one beside me. This thing looked like it was 10 or 11 feet tall, maybe more. Where the Bigfoot next to me had seemed almost careful in its movements, this one moved with pure predatory aggression. As it got closer, I could make out more details through the gaps in the foliage. Its face was scarred and mean-looking, with patches of fur missing, showing dark skin underneath. Its mouth hung open slightly, revealing what looked like large teeth. It was sniffing the air as it moved, head swiveling back and forth, hunting for something, hunting for me. The smaller Bigfoot beside me grabbed my arm. Its grip was gentle but firm, pulling me deeper into the ravine, behind some fallen logs and thick brush. We pressed ourselves into the shadows and stayed absolutely still. I barely dared to breathe. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. The large Bigfoot passed right above us, so close I could have reached up and touched its foot if I'd wanted to. The smell that came off it was overwhelming, thick and musky and rotten, like decomposing meat mixed with animal musk. I had to fight the urge to gag. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't look down and see us. It stopped, directly above where we were hiding. My blood turned to ice. The creature sniffed the air again, that massive head turning slowly as it processed the scents. Could it smell me? Could it smell the other Bigfoot? I didn't know how good their sense of smell was, but I had to assume it was better than human. Then it let out a sound that will haunt me for the rest of my life. A low, rumbling growl that I felt in my chest, in my bones. It was a sound of pure menace, pure hunger. The sound a predator makes when it knows prey is nearby but can't quite locate it. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, even though I knew running would mean instant death. The smaller Bigfoot kept its hand on my shoulder, keeping me still, keeping me quiet. I could feel it trembling slightly. It was as scared as I was. We stayed frozen like that for what felt like an eternity. The large Bigfoot took a few more steps, still searching, still sniffing. Then, finally, it moved on. We didn't move. We stayed pressed against that ravine wall for another 10 minutes at least, neither of us willing to risk making a sound. I counted my heartbeats, trying to slow my breathing, trying to calm down. Eventually, the smaller Bigfoot relaxed slightly and gestured for me to follow. I didn't have a choice. I also realized something profound in that moment. This creature had just saved my life. It had been following me not to hunt me, but protect me. When I ran, it had chased me not to catch me, but to keep me moving, to herd me away from something. It had known the large Bigfoot was out there, and it had been trying to keep me safe. We climbed out of the ravine carefully, the Bigfoot moving first and checking to make sure the coast was clear. Then we started moving through the forest. The creature moved slowly now, cautiously, constantly checking behind us and listening. Every few minutes, it would stop and just stand there, head tilted, listening to sounds I couldn't hear. It led me through parts of the forest that seemed deliberately hidden. We followed winding paths between thick undergrowth, squeezed between fallen trees, crossed streams at specific points. This wasn't random. The Bigfoot knew exactly where it was going. This was its territory, and it knew every inch of it. After about 20 minutes of walking, it stopped and pointed at the ground. I looked down. and saw footprints in a patch of mud. Massive footprints, each one at least 2 feet long and nearly a foot wide. The edges were deep and clear. The weight that had made these prints must have been enormous. These were the large Bigfoot's tracks. The smaller Bigfoot gestured at the prints, then at its own feet. The difference in size was shocking. Its own feet were maybe 14 inches long. These prints were nearly twice that size. It was showing me the danger, showing me how much bigger and more powerful the hunter was. We continued on. The Bigfoot led me to a large tree and pointed up. I looked and saw claw marks gouged deep into the bark. The marks started about 12 feet off the ground and dragged down to maybe 7 feet up. Whatever made these marks had incredible reach and strength. The wood under the bark was exposed, showing how deep the claws had cut. A little further into the forest, we came to a spot where a backpack was hanging from a tree branch about 15 feet up. The pack was torn and faded, clearly had been there for a while, weathered by rain and sun. I couldn't reach it, but I could see it clearly. It looked like a standard hiking pack, blue and gray. The Bigfoot pointed at it, then pointed ahead through the trees. I followed its gesture and saw another backpack about 30 yards away, this one green, caught on some lower branches. And beyond that, I could make out what looked like a torn jacket hanging from yet another tree. My blood went cold as I realized what I was seeing. These were the missing hikers, or at least these were their belongings. All these items scattered through the forest like grave markers. How many people had walked into these woods and never walked back out? How many had encountered the large Bigfoot and not survived? The Bigfoot led me to a small cave entrance that was hidden behind some rocks and thick brush. You'd never spot it unless you knew exactly where to look. It gestured for me to look inside. I pulled out my phone to use as a flashlight even though the battery was getting low. I'd been out here for 2 days without charging it. The inside of the cave made my stomach turn. It was like a memorial, or maybe a museum. Camping gear was arranged carefully along the walls, hiking boots lined up in a neat row, jackets and fleeces hung from natural rock protrusions, water bottles and canteens placed carefully on flat rocks. Everything was organized, deliberate. There had to be dozens of items, different brands, different colors, different levels of wear, all from different people. I saw modern gear and stuff that looked older, from years ago. Each item represented a person who had come into these woods and never left. A person with a family somewhere, with friends, with a life they'd never get to return to. The Bigfoot pointed at the items, then pointed back in the direction where we'd hidden from the large one. It was showing me, making me understand. The large Bigfoot was hunting humans, killing them, and this smaller one had been collecting their belongings, maybe as evidence, maybe as some kind of remembrance, maybe out of respect for the dead. I didn't know, but the care with which everything was arranged suggested this meant something to the creature. We left the cave and continued through the forest. Over the next several hours, the Bigfoot showed me more of the territory. It pointed out safe paths, areas where the foliage was thicker and provided cover. It showed me dangerous spots to avoid, clearings where you'd be exposed and visible. Sometimes we walked together. Sometimes the Bigfoot would disappear into the trees and then reappear ahead of me, having scouted the path forward. It showed me 3 more spots with human belongings: a torn tent, a broken camping stove, a hiking pole that had been snapped in half. Each discovery made the reality more grim. This wasn't just a couple of people who got lost. This was systematic. The large Bigfoot had been hunting humans in this forest for years, maybe decades. At one point, the Bigfoot led me to a rocky outcrop that overlooked a valley. We climbed up carefully and looked out over the forest stretching below us. The view would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Miles and miles of wilderness, mountains in the distance, the afternoon sun painting everything in gold. But then I saw movement down in the valley. The large Bigfoot was down there, maybe a mile away, moving along what looked like a game trail. Even from this distance, I could tell it was massive. It was dragging something, pulling it along the ground behind it. I couldn't tell what it was, and I didn't want to know. I had a pretty good idea. The smaller Bigfoot grabbed my shoulder and pointed emphatically at the valley, then made a pushing gesture with both hands. "Stay away, don't go down there." The message was crystal clear. That valley was the hunting ground, and going down there meant death. As evening approached, the light in the forest started to change, taking on that golden quality you get just before sunset. The shadows grew longer, the temperature started to drop. I was exhausted, hadn't eaten since morning, was still wearing the same clothes I'd been sweating in all day. But the Bigfoot kept us moving. The large Bigfoot seemed to be moving in our general direction again. I could hear it in the distance, breaking branches, making its presence known. The smaller one became more urgent in its movements, pulling me along faster, getting me into hiding spots quickly. First, we hid in a hollow tree trunk, an old oak that had rotted out inside but was still standing. The space was cramped, barely big enough for both of us. We pressed together in the darkness, the Bigfoot's fur rough against my skin, its breath warm and musty. I could hear the large one passing somewhere nearby. Its footsteps were distinctive now, heavy, purposeful, predatory. Through a gap in the tree trunk, I caught a glimpse of it moving through the forest maybe 40 yards away. It was hunting actively now, head swinging back and forth, stopping every few steps to sniff the air. Looking for us, looking for me specifically probably, fresh human scent in its territory. My protector kept one massive hand on my shoulder the whole time we were hiding. The gesture wasn't restraining or threatening, it was reassuring, comforting, like it was telling me that everything would be okay, that I just needed to stay calm and quiet and trust it. And I did trust it. This creature had saved my life. It was still saving my life. After the large one had passed, we moved quickly to a new location. The smaller Bigfoot knew exactly where it was going, leading me through a maze of undergrowth to another hiding spot. This one behind a massive fallen log covered in moss and ferns. We crouched there in the gathering darkness, waiting again. The large Bigfoot came through again, closer this time. I could hear it grunting, a sound of frustration maybe. It knew something was in its territory. It could probably smell me, smell the other Bigfoot. But the forest was big and the shadows were growing, and we kept staying one step ahead of it. We repeated this pattern 3 more times as full darkness fell. Hide, wait for the hunter to pass, move quickly to a new spot. Each time it seemed to get a little closer. Each time my heart pounded a little harder. The smaller Bigfoot was showing signs of stress too, moving more jerkily, breathing harder. Finally, as the last light was fading from the sky, the smaller Bigfoot made a decision. It gestured that we needed to separate. It pointed at me, then pointed at a small cave entrance that was barely visible in the growing darkness. Then it pointed at itself and gestured out toward the forest where the large one was hunting. It was going to lead the danger away from me, draw the large Bigfoot off, give me a chance to hide safely. I shook my head, not wanting it to put itself in danger for me, but it was insistent, gently but firmly pushing me toward the cave. Before it left, it did something that made tears spring to my eyes. It placed its massive hand on my chest, right over my heart. I could feel the warmth through my shirt, feel the gentle pressure. Then it pointed to its own chest, to where its heart would be. The message was clear. We're the same. We both have hearts. We're both alive. We both matter. Then it was gone. It crashed off through the forest, deliberately making noise, drawing attention to itself. I could hear it breaking branches, calling out with hoots and grunts. Leading the hunter away from where I was hiding, I crawled into the small cave and pressed myself against the back wall. It wasn't much of a cave, more like a deep overhang in some rocks. But it was hidden and dark, and it would have to do. I sat there in the pitch blackness, shivering from cold and fear and exhaustion, listening to the sounds of the forest. In the distance, I could hear roaring, not animal roaring, deeper than that, more powerful, the sound of two massive creatures fighting. Trees were breaking, rocks were falling. The ground shook with the impact of their struggle. I pressed my hands over my ears, not wanting to hear it, terrified that my protector was going to die because of me. The fighting went on for what felt like hours. Sometimes it sounded close, sometimes it moved farther away. I could hear the large Bigfoot bellowing, a sound of rage and aggression. I could hear the smaller one calling back, defiant and determined. They were really fighting, not posturing, not displaying, actually fighting to the death. Eventually, the sounds died down. The forest went quiet again. I didn't know if that was good or bad. I didn't know who had won. I didn't know if my protector was still alive out there or if the large one was now searching for me alone. I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump, every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig. I kept thinking about my family, wondering if they'd ever know what happened to me if I didn't make it out. Wondering if I'd just become another missing person statistic, another mystery that would never be solved. Another backpack hanging from a tree somewhere. I thought about all the dangerous things I'd done in my life, all the stupid risks I'd taken for that adrenaline rush. And here I was, possibly about to die in the most mundane way imaginable. Not from base jumping or climbing or extreme sports. Just from walking too far into the wrong forest, from being in the wrong place at the wrong time, from being prey to something I didn't even know existed. The night stretched on forever. I don't think I've ever experienced time moving so slowly. Every minute felt like an hour. I kept checking my phone even though I knew there was no signal out here. The battery was down to 15%. The little glowing screen was my only light source, my only connection to the world I'd come from. Dawn came slowly, gray light gradually filtering into my hiding spot. I was stiff and cold, and my whole body ached from sitting in one position all night. The forest was still quiet. No bird calls yet, no sign of activity. I stayed in the cave, afraid to move, afraid to make myself visible. Hours passed. The sun rose higher. I heard birds starting to call again, which seemed like a good sign. If the birds were active, maybe the danger had passed. But I still didn't dare leave my hiding spot. Then I heard footsteps approaching. My heart started racing again. I pressed myself against the back of the cave, trying to make myself invisible. The footsteps were slow and heavy, but they had a familiar rhythm. Different from the large Bigfoot stomping gait. A shape appeared at the cave entrance, blocking out the light. The smaller Bigfoot. It was alive. Relief flooded through me so intensely I almost started crying. It was alive. It had survived. But it was hurt. I could see scratches all over its body, deep gouges in its fur. One of its arms was bleeding from what looked like a nasty bite wound. Part of its fur was matted with dried blood. It was moving stiffly, clearly in pain. But it had won. Somehow it had fought off the larger Bigfoot and survived. It gestured for me to follow one last time. We started walking. The Bigfoot led me on a long, winding path through the safest parts of the forest, taking the most hidden routes, avoiding any areas where the large one might still be. The journey took almost 6 hours. My feet were blistered and raw in my boots. My legs were shaking from exhaustion and lack of food. But I kept going, following my protector through the endless forest. The sun was high in the sky when I finally saw it. Through the trees ahead, the trailhead parking lot. My truck was still there, covered in leaves and bird droppings, sitting exactly where I'd left it 3 days ago. It felt like a lifetime had passed since I'd parked there, full of confidence and excitement about my adventure. The Bigfoot stopped at the edge of the forest. It wouldn't come any closer to civilization. We stood there at the tree line, about 50 yards from the parking lot. Just standing there looking at each other one last time, I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to tell it that I owed it everything. I wanted to explain how grateful I was. But I didn't have words for that. I didn't think it would understand English anyway. So I did what it had done. I placed my hand on my own chest, over my heart. Then I pointed at the Bigfoot. It watched me for a long moment, those dark, intelligent eyes looking into mine. Then it nodded slowly, a very human gesture. It understood. It knew what I was trying to say. It turned and walked back into the forest. I watched it go, watching that massive form disappear between the trees, melting into the shadows. Within seconds, it was gone, like it had never been there at all, like the last 3 days had been some kind of fever dream. I walked to my truck on shaking legs. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I sat there in the driver's seat for a few minutes, just staring at the steering wheel, trying to process everything that had happened, trying to convince myself it had been real. Finally, I started the engine and drove out of there. I drove too fast down that winding mountain road, barely paying attention, just needing to get away from those woods. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something following me. The drive home passed in a daze, 6 hours of highway that I barely remember. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of what I'd seen, what I'd experienced. My backpack and all my gear were gone, abandoned somewhere in that forest. I had scratches all over my arms and face from running through the brush. My clothes were torn and filthy. I smelled terrible. But I was alive. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just go back to normal life and pretend nothing had happened. But who could I tell? Who would believe me? My family would think I'd lost my mind. My friends would laugh it off as a tall tale. The authorities would be skeptical at best. The next day, I drove to the ranger station and filed a report. I told them I'd gone hiking, gotten lost, and managed to find my way back out. They seemed suspicious that I'd lost all my gear but had no major injuries. They asked if I'd seen anything unusual. I said no, just got turned around, spent a couple nights sleeping rough, made it back to the trailhead. They warned me again about going deep into that forest, gave me a lecture about safety and preparation. I nodded and thanked them and left. But I couldn't let it go. I started doing research online, reading everything I could find about the Devil's Creek disappearances. There were more cases than I'd realized. Way more. Over the years, hundreds of people had vanished in forests across the Pacific Northwest. Devil's Creek was just one spot. There were others, lots of others. I found forums dedicated to Bigfoot sightings. Most of the reports were peaceful encounters or just fleeting glimpses. People who saw something in the woods, couldn't explain it, moved on. But scattered among the peaceful reports were more sinister stories. People who said they'd felt hunted, stalked, chased. People who'd experienced the forest going silent around them. People who'd run for their lives from something they couldn't quite see or identify. There were specific reports about an aggressive Bigfoot in the Devil's Creek area going back decades. Stories from people who'd turned back before going too deep, who trusted their instincts and gotten out. A few reports from people who said they'd felt like something else was out there, something that even other Bigfoot were afraid of. Those reports were rare, but they were there if you knew what to look for. I started to piece together what I think is the truth. Bigfoot are real. They're out there, living in the deep wilderness, avoiding humans as much as possible. Most of them are peaceful, shy. They want nothing to do with us. But there are exceptions, rogues, outcasts. Maybe they're individuals who've gone mad or who are always more aggressive. Maybe they're cast out from their own kind for being too violent. I don't know their social structure or their psychology, but they're out there. And there are others, like the one who saved me, who seem to have taken it upon themselves to protect humans from these rogue predators. Maybe they feel responsible. Maybe they understand that if humans knew the truth, we'd come into their forests with guns and hunting parties and wipe them all out, good and bad alike. So they try to protect us, to keep us safe from their own kind. It's been 3 months now since I came back from those woods. I still can't sleep properly. The nightmares are constant. I see the large Bigfoot in my dreams, that scarred face, those dead eyes. I hear its roaring. I feel the terror of hiding in that ravine while it hunted for me. But I also dream about the smaller one sometimes, my protector. I see those intelligent eyes, feel that gentle hand on my shoulder. I remember the way it communicated with gestures, the way it patiently showed me the dangers, the way it deliberately put itself in harm's way to save me. I wonder if it's still out there. I wonder if its wounds healed. I wonder if it's still watching over that forest, still trying to protect lost hikers. I'm still an adrenaline junkie. I still love that rush, that feeling of being alive on the edge. But I'll never go back to Devil's Creek. I'll never set foot in those woods again. Some thrills aren't worth it. Some dangers are too real, too immediate, too deadly. I think about those missing hikers all the time now, not just the 40 from Devil's Creek, but the thousands across the country who've vanished in wilderness areas over the years. How many of them just got lost? How many had accidents? How many fell victim to the elements or wild animals? And how many ran into something else, something that isn't supposed to exist but does? I know the truth now, at least part of it. There's a predator in these woods, maybe more than one, and they're hunting humans, not all the time, not systematically. But when humans wander too deep into their territory, when we become vulnerable and isolated, we become prey. We become targets for something bigger and stronger and more cunning than we ever imagined. But there are also protectors out there. Bigfoot who watch over us, who try to keep us safe, who risk their own lives to save ours. The one who saved me could have just let me die, could have stayed hidden and let nature take its course. Instead, it revealed itself, put itself in danger, fought another member of its own species to keep me alive. I'll never know why it made that choice, but I'm grateful beyond words that it did. So I'm writing this because I want people to know. I want them to understand what's out there. If you're planning to hike in remote wilderness areas, especially places known for disappearances, please listen to the warnings. Don't ignore the advice of locals and rangers. Don't go deep into the forest alone. Don't assume you're at the top of the food chain just because you're human. And if something starts following you in the woods, pay attention to how it behaves. If it's aggressive, if it's trying to cut off your escape routes, if it's stalking you like prey, then yes, you're in immediate danger. Get out however you can. But if it's following you slowly, if it seems to be herding you in a certain direction, if it reveals itself but doesn't attack, consider the possibility that it's trying to help you, that it's trying to protect you from something worse that you can't see. Don't automatically assume that the thing following you wants to hurt you. Sometimes the monster you can see is trying to save you from the monster you can't see. Sometimes the thing in the shadows is on your side. The smaller Bigfoot saved my life. It showed me the truth about what's happening in those forests. It risked everything to keep me alive when it could have just let nature take its course. I owe it more than I can ever repay. And I hope with everything in me that it's still out there, still watching, still protecting people who don't even know they need protection. Sometimes the scariest looking thing turns out to be your salvation. Sometimes you survive because something you didn't even know existed decided you were worth saving. Sometimes the line between monster and guardian is thinner than you ever imagined. 3 months later, I'm still here, still alive, still remembering the feeling of that massive hand on my shoulder, still seeing those dark, worried eyes looking into mine, still carrying the weight of what I know. And I know I'll never be the same. How could I be? I've seen behind the curtain. I've glimpsed a reality that most people don't even believe in. And I can't unsee it. I'll never forget what I saw in those woods. I'll never forget the truth about what happened to those missing hikers. And I'll never forget the creature who saved my life when it could have simply let me die. So yeah, Bigfoot is real. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've been saved by it. I've watched it fight for my life. And now I know what happened to all those people who went into the woods and never came back. Some of them met the wrong Bigfoot, the predator, the hunter, and they never stood a chance. Some of them might have met the right Bigfoot, the protector, but maybe they met it too late. Maybe they panicked and ran the wrong direction. Maybe they didn't understand what was trying to help them until it was too late. I got lucky. I met my protector with just enough time, and I trusted it, even when every instinct told me to run. That trust saved my life. If you take anything away from my story, take this. The woods are deeper and stranger than we give them credit for. There are things out there that science doesn't acknowledge, that society doesn't believe in. But they're real, they're out there. And sometimes when you're alone in the wilderness, you're not at the top of the food chain anymore. Sometimes you're just another animal trying to survive in someone else's territory. And whether you make it out or not might depend on which version of that someone else you encounter. The hunter or the guardian, the predator or the protector. I encountered both. And I'm one of the lucky ones who lived to tell about it. For more interesting stories, check this out.